Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all so much for spending your Thursday evening and staying on here so late. And thank you to the IFF team for organizing this conversation and for doing everything that you do to preserve digital rights. So when they contacted me to speak on this topic, asking would I speak on this right to loitering, it was kind of the first thought was, am I being surveilled? Like, how do they know this is in my DNA to be loitering about? And secondly, how is it possible to have a conversation around loitering, the idea of loitering in India, without thinking about the seminal work, the book called Why Loitering by Fatke Rana Day and Khan, where if you haven't read it, you're going to hear a lot about it in the next few minutes. I would recommend the book highly to everyone. But really, what they do is to look at this question of loitering from a feminist lens and try to unpack that. One, they make us aware that when you think about loitering, if you think about a public space, what you never imagine and what you don't see in everyday life is women occupying these spaces. You don't see women just going in groups, going individually, going solo, and spending time just doing nothing in a public space, right? It's not something which is normal. They do say this in the context of Mumbai, but it could apply to any city in India, right? And that logic holds true. And we're going to walk through their argument, and what they eventually try to establish is that loitering is not something which should be seen as a luxury. It is something which should be seen as a right. The ability to loiter, surely, nobody stops me, I can go and be in a public space, but the ability to do that without fear, without the risk of an attack, without the risk of being viewed in a certain way, I think that is what a true right to loitering would consist of. So just to this question, I've been going on and on using the term loitering. What does it even mean to be loitering, right? And the simple meaning of it is that you're in a public space without a purpose, right? You're just chilling, you're hanging out. There are multiple words, right, for it. Every language will have its own word. In Hindi or Urdu, people will call it avara gardi, people may call it vela panti. In Chandigarh, people do it like geri marna. I'm sure whatever languages you speak, there is a term for this concept of just hanging out with no purpose. And very often you would also realize that there is a negative connotation to this, right? Because in such a purpose driven life where everything is you're supposed to be achieving something all the time, to just be out there and wasting your time, really, like, that's the inherent definition of it, is that you're idling. And in that context, to kind of make a case that you should actually have a right to be doing this. Not only are you being unproductive, now we want to claim that there is a right to privacy element and you should have a right to do this. It can sound frivolous, especially in the context of what we are seeing all around us, where people are not safe in their homes, in their workplaces, in schools. In that context, to actually say that there should be a right in the public space is something which can sound indefensible. But really, to go back to Puttaswamy and what we heard from Justice Muralidharan, the judgment clearly says that the right to privacy is something that attaches to an individual. It is not attached to the space that they occupy. For very long, the idea of privacy was linked to the privacy of your home, the privacy of your body, of your person. But that's not the limits of the right to privacy, right? The judgment very clearly says, in the majority view, that there are realms of privacy. So there is the intimate zone, there is the private zone, and then there is a public zone. And the idea of privacy can differ in all of these zones, but there is certainly, as long as the individual is present in all of these zones, there is a right to privacy, there is a right to dignity which attaches with this, right? And the argument that the authors are making in this book is that why do they claim that there should be a right to loiter? They actually make a claim that women should be loitering, women should be out at night, and that logic applies to all the other groups that we don't see. Whenever you think of the idea of people loitering, just hanging out, when you think of parks, usually anywhere you go in India, you will see a bunch of guys playing cricket, playing football. You will never see girls doing the same, right? At a certain age, girls just stop being part of that loitering culture, and they are told to be home, to stay safe, because you need to have this construct. The society has created this construct of what a responsible woman looks like. Whenever she's out there, she's either out with her family, or she's out with friends, or she's out for a purpose. You could be doing groceries, you could be going to work, going to college, but you're out in the streets, in public spaces, with a purpose. You're not there just to hang, just to be by yourself, sort of thing. And And I think, the important question to think about is, if we think about the right to loitering, what is it that we need to enable this right? What do we need to do to make these public spaces accessible, where I can actually go and feel free and feel comfortable? And it's not just applicable to women, right? You don't see persons with disability just loitering around. You generally don't see the elderly. They may go for an evening walk, but you will not see them just loitering around, right? It's a concept which you generally associate with young men. They are the ones who you expect to be loitering around generally, right? So what do you need to do to change that culture and to change that mindset, right? And what do you want from the state and from institutions to be able to do that? At the very first, you need welcoming public spaces, right? The What we see today is the reverse of welcoming public spaces, where all over the world, including India, like benches are being designed in a way so that homeless people will not come and sit on them, so that couples are not encouraged to come and spend time on them, right? So the infrastructure is being designed in a way where you want to exclude rather than include. So that's the first thing which needs to be changed when we think about how do you assert somebody's right to loiter. The second thing you need to change is to create infrastructures where you are able to get to this place and feel safe. So to have public transportation where you feel safe getting to this place, getting back home from this place, to have not just metro rails but have feeder services, to have street light when you walk home from the feeder service to your house and to your doorstep, right? So all of these pieces of infrastructure need to be falling into place before someone can really freely assert their right to loiter. And why should they have this right? The authors really make this claim that actually, when you're saying the right to loiter, it's the right to have fun. It's the right to take risks for yourself, not risks imposed upon you by social construct, by people out there, but it's the right that you exercise. It's the right of self-determination in that sense, linking back to Puttaswamy. It's my right to decide with dignity which spaces I want to occupy and to be able to comfortably occupy them, right? And the other important point to note is that the space is not something which is, it just exists. A park is a space, but it becomes a park and it acquires a character depending on who occupies that space, right? So if a lot of us, men, women, young, old, are usually occupying a park, everyone else feels safe coming into that park, right? But if it's a space which is only occupied by one group, others, either because of preconceived notions or because of incidents that we see around us, others don't feel comfortable participating and co-creating that space. And therefore, by loitering or occupying these spaces, just being, I keep using the word loitering, but I don't want it to sound like a frivolous thing to be doing. The point I'm trying to make is by asserting your right to be in these public spaces, you're asserting your right as a citizen to decide where you want to be and what you want to be doing, without the risk of repercussions, without people thinking that you are not a good woman because you're drinking in a park, or you're not a good woman because you are a guy with a guy in a park. Without those repercussions, how do you create spaces which are accessible and open for women and for people who are generally not in these spaces, right? So with that, I want to get into, one of the trends that we see is the around, when we can't find safe spaces which are public, there is this tendency of privatizing spaces so that you can at least create walled gardens within which the wealthy feel comfortable, right? And this is happening in gated communities. RWAs are doing this, where they will create their own security systems. We will find ways to exclude others, because inherent to the idea of, a vulnerable or a victim woman is this idea of there being a perpetrator, potential perpetrator. And usually there are again buckets. This perpetrator is usually someone from a low income group. This perpetrator is viewed as, it could be someone from a religious minority, from a caste minority, from it could be someone from a denotified tribe. But really there are preconceived notions about who needs to be protected and who is the one you're protecting them from. And what the society ends up doing in both these processes is that both these people are excluded from the public space. Women are not there because it's unsafe for them to be there, and the perpetrators are not there, or the potential perpetrators are not there because it's unsafe for the other participants to be in that space if they are there. And so a large group of people are being excluded by the views of a few people who then become kind of the guardians of these spaces, right? There are people in your RWAs, there are people like us. Many of us are making these decisions all of the time. And technology is enabling these decisions because there are apps like Adda, MyGate, which kind of facilitate this being done at scale for wealthy people living in these gated communities, which tell you that I'll create this gate pass system. If you want to keep people out, basically have them authenticated by me. No one will enter. Your domestic workers will not enter. Your delivery guys will not enter, because these are the threat actors in society or to our community, and we'll let you kind of filter who enters or who doesn't enter, give you control over this space, and therefore create a safe space in that context. And there's also this other level where this is going is initiatives across cities where you're seeing this public private partnership between the cops and these overzealous authorities, RWAs, etc. You have specific initiatives like in Bhopal, where you have the possibility of people registering their private CCTVs, the colonies registering their private CCTVs under an app called Bhopal Eye, where they give the feed from those channels into the systems maintained by the cops. Similarly, in Delhi, there is a lot of privatization of surveillance. Anyway, cities are competing on being who is the most connected in terms of CCTVs. Cities are wearing that as a badge of honor, and you're seeing these initiatives where not only are they the states institutions setting up their CCTV networks, there are also private entities who become, in that sense, community police and are working with authorities to set up these CCTVs, which are of course seen as this silver bullet for solving the safety and security problem for women and the vulnerable groups at large. And there, I think I want to just point out there is a difference between perception and what the reality shows us. In terms of perception, numerous studies have shown when you go and ask people across income groups, there are a lot of people who do believe that having a CCTV does enhance their security. There's an interesting study by which was published by CIS, and they found that where the middle class women generally find that CCTVs enhance their security, and women living in slums from lower income backgrounds were saying they were still in favor of CCTV because it enhances their ability to disclaim allegations of them being thieves, right? So when there are allegations made that you have stolen something, they can use that footage to show that I wasn't actually there. But of course, these are notional, these are perception-based answers. When you look at the actual crime rate and whether, there is a statistical significance of having larger number of CCTVs in your city and the crime rates going down, studies show that that's not really the case. Perhaps for investigation, yes, it does help after the act has occurred. But in terms of deterrence, in terms of overall reduction in crime, that is not being shown by the numbers. And even for investigation, I think it's useful to be mindful that, there is obviously a politics around, and by politics I mean just the power equation around when CCTVs are used as evidence. So routinely you will find CCTV footage which is blocked out, or cameras which were dysfunctional or were vandalized. So just the fact that something was recorded may have created a perception of security, but really either in terms of deterrence or in terms of investigation, it's not necessary. It will lead you to better outcomes. I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to close with, talking about this whole idea of loitering. So a couple of months back, there is a project being done by Point of View, and they interviewed me for it, and they said, okay, so we're trying to translate this whole idea of loitering. I've so far been talking about loitering in public spaces, which are physical, and they are thinking about loitering in online spaces, and they asked me, what does it mean to be loitering? And I would encourage all of you to think about. They asked me, what are these online spaces where you loiter? And I found it a real struggle to come up with the answer, because I was taking my own notions of, where am I being productive and where am I being not productive to say whether I'm loitering or not. And I thought of many things like Duolingo is not loitering because I'm learning something, but social media is definitely loitering because within social media, there's this hierarchy of the creators and the lurkers, and I'm more of the lurker. So I'm definitely lurking and I'm definitely loitering there. But I would encourage all of you to kind of think about, these questions about where you are loitering and who has control, who's setting the norms around these spaces. In the online spaces, it's clearly the intermediaries and the state working through them, either for censorship or to, trace you in a better manner. And despite that bad note and this despite the sad note on that part of it, I would, one takeaway I'm hoping you will have from this chat is to just think about this idea of loitering a little more seriously. Do loiter, do encourage others around you to loiter, and do be more cognizant when we are out in the public spaces. Be more observant of, who's loitering and who's not, and what needs to change. So thank you.